Jesse go? Well, I want to be at the beach. Or the Grand Canyon.
There he is.
Hello. So it can't be the Grand Canyon.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. How about that? I'm going to call this meeting to order. Today is October 7th. This is the meeting of the Metro Plan Greater Flagstaff Region. I'd like to provide notice that the board has the ability to recess into executive session for legal advice should we so choose to do so. With that, Ms. Rosie, can we please have roll call?
Yes, from the executive board member list, Coral Evans,
Present.
Charlie Odegaard.
He's connecting.
Oh, okay. We'll skip him and come back. Jesse Thompson,
Present.
Matt Ryan is
Present.
excused. Oh, thank you, Jesse. Matt Ryan is excused and Art Babbitt are excused today. Jim McCarthy,
Here.
Steve Peru,
Present.
Regina Salas.
Present.
And staff, Jeff Smilebeck. Present.
Present.
Dave Wessel is not present, and Rosie Ware. And can we have names of people on the phone right now, please? We have Brett. I see Brett Peterson and
This is Julie Lead.
Julie Lead. Thank you. And I think that concludes the roll call, unless there's anyone that I missed.
This is Councilmember Charlie Odegaard. I'm here.
No, thank you. That will conclude the roll call. Chair Evans.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for that. We're going to go ahead and go down our agenda. We are now down to public comment. I believe that we do have one individual here, Ms. Lead, who would be interested in public comment. We can go ahead and start with you, and then we'll see if there's anyone else.
Thank you, Mayor Evans, and good morning, councilors, supervisors, and members of the board. My name is Julie Lead. I am a civil engineer and co-owner of Peak Engineering, a local civil engineering firm. I am particularly passionate about all things transportation, as many of you probably already know, related in Flagstaff, which is why I want to take this chance to introduce myself to you today. I served on the Regional Plan Citizens Advisory Committee, the Transportation Tax Commission, and was recently elected as chair of the Transportation Commission, which I've served on the last couple of years. With the continuation of the transportation tax 419, it is evident that our community values and supports investments in transportation and all modes of transportation. So in that spirit, I look forward to working with Metro Plan, other agency partners, and city staff to further the function of the Transportation Commission, which is to recommend, review, promote, and advise on policies, regulations, and initiatives related to transportation. So I wanted to thank Jeff and Dave for inviting me to today's meeting. I'm really eager to listen in on your discussions and share what I learned and hear with my colleagues on the commission. So thank you.
Thank you for being here. Is there anyone else here for items? Mr. Malbeck.
No, Madam Chair, thank you. I was waving at our last speaker. That was it. I don't need to speak at this time. Thank you.
Is there anyone else here for items that are not on our agenda? Not seeing anyone, we will go ahead and move forward. We will go down to, I don't believe we have anything on our consent agenda today, do we?
No, ma'am, we do not.
Okay, we'll go down to general business. First up would
Do we
be,
have minutes of the meeting though, Mayor?
oh, my bad, sorry. Let's go back up to approval of the minutes. These would be our minutes from our regular meeting, which was September 2nd, 2020. This will be found in pages 5 and 9 of your agenda packet. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Mayor, this is Charlie, and I so move.
Is there a second?
Second, Supervisor Thompson.
There's been a motion made
Second.
by Mr. Odegaard with a second by Mr. Thompson to approve the minutes of our regular scheduled meeting on September 2nd, 2020. Is there any further comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. We're now down to general business. First up would be our fiscal year 2020 financial report. This is pages 10 and 13 of your packet. Mr. Malbach?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. I want to acknowledge, I'm in my office on Heritage Square, and it can sometimes be pretty noisy with sound that comes up. So I trust somebody will let me know if there's too much interference. Hopefully it'll work okay. And I appreciate you all being here today. I know how busy you are, especially in this season. So I'm going to call your attention to this item, Financial 20 Financial Report. There is really no recommendation. This is to bring back and close out the year. A couple of times since January, I have brought this report to the board and predicted where I thought we would be with our fiscal year 20 financial status. And one of the things just to point out is really last year, as everyone knows, was a transition to independence. We somewhat inherited a city budget and long-standing tried and true city processes while we were setting up our own. And what we found, a couple of things in the budget. Salaries and benefits tracked pretty much right where we thought they would be. They're just under budget by 3.75%. Our operating expenses, however, were well over budget, 118%, so more than double. And that's because we had double the host agency services. Not only were we continuing to pay the city for the services they provided, we were setting up our own independent services with office space and legal counsel and utilities. And these costs will stabilize in the coming year and the year we're currently in, because we're only going to be paying our own costs, not also paying for host agency services. Travel expenses, not surprisingly, are underspent. COVID-19 is a big part of that. And then project expenses were underspent. And I want to call your attention to this one, well underspent, 85% underspent. Because although we budgeted money in projects, we really spent last year going through a process of identifying exactly how we want to spend the money. How can we be most strategic? So there's a lot that we needed to carry over for projects. For example, I put in there 350,000. We're going to go get the Lone Tree Corridor, done. And then as we went through the process, determined that the City of Flagstaff is going to run that design and planning effort. So that's one example of it. I want to point out there's no fiscal impact in accepting this report. I'm not really asking you to adopt it. I just want to let you know that we have rolled, what we've learned forward into fiscal year 21 budget. And that concludes my report, Mayor.
Okay, board, are there any questions? I do not see any questions. So we're going to go ahead and go down to our fiscal year 2021 budget amendment. This could be found on pages 14 and 17 of your packet. There is a staff recommended action that we approve these amendments and the increase in the budget in the amount of $167,459.89. Mr. Malbach?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the board. Yes, I am asking for action on this item. And I want to point out that on May 6th, the board adopted our fiscal year 21 budget. It totaled just over $1 million, and it did not include 2 transit funding sources. So we're asking for those to be included now. One of them is a $150,000 transit study. Mountain Line actually wrote and won the grant. However, the way things are set up at the state, the state really requires the money to flow through MetroPlan on the way to Mountain Line. So to make this all work, appropriately, we need to adopt our budget to show this money as a revenue from ADOT and then an expense as we pass it through to Mountain Line. It's really an administrative effort, and if the board wants us to do this grant, and I'm recommending that you do, I'm asking that you adopt the budget. We also have a small detail. I just went ahead and put it here for transparency's sake. I really thought a grant was going to close out last year. We were going to finish it. We didn't finish it. So there's a small amount of money, $17,500 approximately, that I just want to roll forward and have documented in this budget, and we can close the grant out this year. The impact is net zero, so we've budgeted the revenues, we've budgeted the expenses, and I'm asking you to adopt it. And I've attached a fiscal year 21 MetroPlan budget amendment, and you can see on page 16, and I'm rolling it past the screen right now, the adopted budget, the exact change that we're asking for, and then where that money is going to be spent, and a couple of items in our 21 budget. And that concludes my report.
Board, do we have any questions? I see Mr. Odegaard.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Malbach. Just out of curiosity's sake, has Mountain Line said concerning that fare-free study? I think that would have been done this year, but because of COVID, it's probably not the best time to do that study concerning fare-free. So do you have an idea what Mountain Line said they might do, or are they still going to continue with doing that study in time of COVID?
Yes, Mayor Evans, Councilmember Odegaard, I appreciate the question, and you're absolutely right. Mountain Line has said that doing a fare-free study at this time with COVID and there's less ridership than ever doesn't really make sense. So they are working with the state to try to apportion those funds to another grant. At this time, that hasn't been done yet. So in order to keep really everything running forward, I'm just asking us to go ahead and adopt the budget so we are prepared to do it if Mountain Line wants to, and then we can also move it again in the future if we need to. That's my understanding, and I see that Steve Peru has highlighted his face and he's on the Mountain Line board. So I'm going to turn it back to you, Mayor.
Okay. I don't believe that Mr. Peru is interested in speaking to this. I think you did a great job, Mr. Malbach. What I'm looking for now is a approval for the amendment.
Madam Chair, this is Steve Peru. I'll make the motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second, Jim McCarthy.
Okay, there's been a motion made by Mr. Peru and a second by Mr. McCarthy to approve this amendment to the fiscal year budget and increase the budget in the amount of $167,459.89. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. We're now down to item number C. This is a UPWP budget amendment, pages 18 and 20 of your agenda packet. Staff's recommended action is that we approve the amendments to the Unified Planning Work Program with the state of Arizona. Mr. Malbec.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. This is really the state's version of the budget that we just amended. So we, as MetroPlan, have our own nonprofit local budget that this board adopts. You just amended it. And the state says, hey, MetroPlan, we're sending you money every year. So you also need to do our budget, our Unified Planning Work Program, and tell us in that all the money you're going to spend and what you're going to spend it on and what you're going to accomplish. Very reasonable request on the part of ADOT. They have their format. So in order to keep everything, all the connections, I'm asking the board to adopt an amendment to the UPWP so that we're consistent with ADOT. And again, essentially, this is the $150,000 grant that we capture in this document. I'm happy to explain more, and I think at this point, though, I'll just turn it back over to you, Mayor.
So board, with that, is there a motion?
Madam Chair, this is Steve Crew. I'll make the motion.
Okay, thank you.
And this is Charlie, and I second that.
Okay, there's been a motion made by Mr. Peru and a second by Mr. Odegaard to approve the amendments to the Unified Planning Work Program with the state of Arizona. Is there any further comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. We're now down to D. This is propositions 419 and 420, project phasing schedule. This would be in pages, are on pages 21 and 22 of your agenda. There's not a recommendation here. Basically, the City of Flagstaff is going to provide an update on the engineering, construction, and phasing schedules for the projects that were approved in 2018 under propositions 419 and 420. I do believe this would be Mr. Peterson.
Yes, Mayor, this is Brett Peterson, Capital Improvements Engineer for the City of Flagstaff. Can you see the PowerPoint slide presentation on your screens?
We can, thank you.
Excellent. So Mayor and members of the board, thank you for inviting me here today to speak about propositions 419 and 420. Some of these slides may look familiar because what we've opted to do in this presentation is refer back to the slides, the original slides that were generated in 2018 as we sought voter approval of propositions 419, 420, and 421. The two I'm focusing on today are 419 and 420. Proposition 419, connecting our community. The money will be used for road, bicycle, pedestrian projects, as well as general projects like traffic signals, street lighting, and signs. This was a flat renewal. It was originally voted upon in 2000, the 2000 transportation tax. What we were doing here was just extending that tax for another 21 years. As a reminder, that tax amounted to 42.6 cents on a $100 purchase. And Proposition 419 at that time was expected to generate about $266 million over that 21-year period. This is a map that shows three components: widening of existing roadway networks, the addition of new roadway that would be funded by Prop 419, and improvements along existing John Wesley Powell Boulevard. So I'll highlight here at the top improvements along West Route 66. As a reminder, West Route 66 is an ADOT route, but as part of Proposition 419, we anticipated some deficiencies, one in number of lanes along that route, as well as two traffic signal needs between Milton Road and Woody Mountain Road. Moving further to the east along Butler Avenue, we have funding in Prop 419 to complete the improvements on Butler basically between Little America and Sonawa High School or middle school. And then shown here in the dashed blue turquoise line is improvements along John Wesley Powell Boulevard from the eastern end of JWP near Pine Canyon out to the intersection of Butler and 4th Street. And then as a reminder that particular portion, the city's share was determined to be 40% of that cost of the improvement. We will be relying on 60% of the funding coming from property owners along that corridor as the proposition currently stands. And then the fully funded portion of JWP improvements extend from Lake Mary Road south out to the airport. Other components to be included with this tax include roadway, pedestrian, bicycle, and safety improvements. Sidewalks are shown in the solid red throughout town. So that would be sidewalks where sidewalks don't currently exist. Bike lanes are shown in the dashed orange. Turquoise solid line here is for the Foots Trail system expansion. And then we've identified, I believe it was a total of 7 locations, 6 are shown here, for pedestrian crossing locations throughout town. And as stated here in the note that this map shows 36 of the 48 planned projects, 148 planned projects. You're all familiar with this, but I just wanted to include this for a little orientation. This is straight out of our budget book, for which I received the hard copy today. So I'm really excited about that. We can make this document available to any and all upon request. But as we're reading through the streets and transportation section of this budget book, we see different categories. And so first up is the streets highway user revenue funds money. And then second, the component that we're talking about today are the transportation tax funded projects. What's shown on this particular sheet includes all of the money that was essentially revenue that was received since 2000, recognizing that money is going to expire in 2000. And so there's no new money for the tax that was extended out in the 4 years, which is coming up on the next page. So we wanted to separate the old tax, if you will, from the new tax. These were the categories of the old tax. It was safety improvements, it was street improvements, 4th Street overpass, and then various Foots Trail component improvements. As I move to the second page of this, and just so you're clear, the column that we're currently in is budget FY21. So it's the one that started in July of 2020 and ends in June of 2021. And then the remaining columns are the last 4 years of the five-year program. So there's a couple components that are identified here. The road repair and street safety tax, which we're not talking about today, but it's in the budget book, so I'll reference it. The Lone Tree Railroad overpass, which is Proposition 420. I'll speak on that here in just a minute. And then the meat of the Proposition 419 funding is right here, identified under road, pedestrian, bicycle, and safety improvements. There are 4 broad categories: new street projects, street widening projects, street operations, bicycle and pedestrian projects. And then we have general improvements and partnering opportunities. So what we have done, Jeff Bauman and myself, Jeff Bauman is our traffic engineer here at the city. We sat down with the input that was received from the Citizens Transportation Tax Commission back in early 2019 to define how we were going to divvy up this money. And the Citizens Transportation Tax Commission did a really good job of defining percentages of that $266 million that we anticipate generating, how that would get spent in these various categories, and what specific types of improvements that would be included. So As you can see under new street projects, the one that's listed here is John Wesley Powell, Lake Mary Road to the airport. Under street widening projects, we have the Butler Avenue widening, we have 4th Street reconstruction, and then we have the Lone Tree Butler to Pine Knoll. So as an example for 4th Street reconstruction, you're all familiar with the fact that we're wrapping up the 4th Street Bridge over I-40. What we have coming up is the extension of the piece of 4th Street between Solier and Sparrow to fill in so that that functions more holistically like the portion of 4th Street north of the bridge. So it'll be 2 lanes in each direction. It'll have pedestrian accommodations on either side of the roadway, et cetera. But we wanted to distinguish between the new money and the old money specifically for that particular project. As you can see, as we move down into street operations, things like dark skies lighting come up, and we've taken the total money allocated for the dark skies lighting program and spread it, I believe, over the first 7 years of the program. So you can see $1.3 million that we anticipate implementing the dark skies lighting project. I'm going to jump down to initial thoughts on the timing of some of these street and bike projects. So Butler Avenue widening, we anticipate that project occurring from the current fiscal year, which is FY21, with the roadway being completed by FY25. 4th Street reconstruction is currently happening, and that portion of Solier to Sparrow will be completed next summer, which pushes it into FY22. Lone Tree, Butler, and Pine Knoll. That's for improvements between Butler Avenue moving south down to Pine Knoll. And if you'll recall, Pine Knoll is the road that enters at the very southern end of NAU's campus. Along that existing corridor, we anticipate some improvements, and we've identified here the years FY24 and FY26 as potential years that we would have money allocated for improvements on existing Lone Tree, primarily associated with the Lone Tree Overpass Proposition 420, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. But we didn't want to just stop right there at Butler Avenue. We felt there could be some improvements along Butler Avenue that could be accommodated with the Prop 419 tax. And then we have the dark skies lighting, which I talked about, FY21 through 27. JWP Lake Mary Road, we anticipate that extension is going to be completed between FY25 and 27. And then at the request of our sustainability manager earlier in our efforts here, we have front loaded the first 7 years of the Foots sidewalk, bike, and pedestrian improvements line item with $2 million per year. I believe this year we're upwards of 2.2, but the request was $2 million per year to front load that effort, which leaves us about 1.07 million per year thereafter through 2041 for Foots Trail improvements. I'll dive quickly into Proposition 420. The money will be used to construct the Lone Tree Railroad overpass from Butler Avenue to Route 66. It'll include trail improvements, sidewalks, and bike lanes. This is a brand new tax. It's 23 cents on a $100 purchase for a 20-year period. The Proposition 420 is expected to generate $132 million over that 20 years. The 2 guiding documents that helped us define ultimately the Lone Tree Overpass project, it started in when we completed the Lone Tree Corridor study in 2006, which looked at the Lone Tree Corridor from John Wesley Powell Boulevard, where it ends today near Pine Canyon, up across the parcel that Juniper Point will exist at some point. This is the community college site here. It will cross either under or over I-40 with a traffic interchange connection, And then it would tie back into existing Lone Tree here and move north up to Butler, and then from Butler Avenue up and over the railroad tracks tying into Route 66. As we moved forward, we had identified those various components of this project, and we thought we could first implement the Lone Tree Overpass study, or the Lone Tree Overpass improvements, which prompted us to study it and completed that study in 2010. And so we are moving forward as we speak on that one. I think I have an update on the timing here in the next slide or two. Just to orient you, the Proposition 419 funding, as a reminder, can be used for improvements south of Butler, and the Prop 420 funding can be used for improvements north of Butler. So that's what's depicted here. One of my project managers is really good with our ArcGIS software, and so he was able to take the line work basically off of the Lone Tree Overpass study and overlay it over an aerial photo in the Southside neighborhood that shows the footprint of the improvement. So this is Butler Avenue here. Today this is Colorado. Colorado will become Lone Tree, and we will arc up and over to a point about here. This dark line depicts the location of the start of the bridge. And so the bridge would start here and it would connect up to Route 66. We would be bridging ourselves up and over the way the plan is drawn, an extension of Eldon Street, which would connect to the two neighborhoods. There would be an extension of the spur track that currently serves the tank farm, recognizing that the tank farm has changed its, the tanks are no longer there, but the current business property owner has an interest in access to that rail spur for a different purpose. So we anticipate that the spur track would be realigned and come through. It's a little hard to see, but the current spur track runs about right through here. And by moving it further to the north, we can decrease the length of our bridge, as the bridge is the most significant cost component of this particular project. We have depicted on this slide the location of the Rio de Flag improvements. This narrow section is the box channel that would run underground. And then this wider section is the open channel where it would extend underneath the Lone Tree Overpass, moving continuously out to the east and tying in at Butler Avenue. And then another component of this particular project is the relocation, not only vertically, but horizontally, of the railroad tracks. So the existing tracks are shown in the light lines here. The relocation would be further to the south. And again, we can move those to the south, but we also need to drop them in elevation to maintain the clearance that we would need to get under this bridge without having to raise Route 66 significantly. We received 4 statements of qualifications from the design build professionals. We are currently evaluating those. Those were received on the 24th. The selection process, all of our evaluators are anticipated to compile their scores and get those back to our purchasing manager by October 19th. And moving forward from there, if we come up with one that we're willing to move forward with, we'll start fee negotiations. If we need to go to interviews, we can do that. But we anticipate that we will be in front of council hopefully no later than December 15th. If we can make it to the December 1st meeting, we will try to accommodate that as well. We anticipate, as I've said many times in the past, that the roadway opening will occur prior to November of 2026. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Okay, I see that Mr. McCarthy does have a question.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Brett. Did I see on one of those slides, and you don't need to go back to it, just answer my question, on Highway 180 up to the Grand Canyon at Forest Street, that a pedestrian crosswalk will be going in? I believe it's that that yellow dot, right there. Yeah.
Yes, sorry, I was muted. Yes, you are correct.
And we've heard, the reason I bring it up is we've had a lot of community interest in that pedestrian crosswalk there. So that is going to happen. Do you have a rough time when it might happen?
I do not. I know the city manager has been working pretty closely with this one. We're certainly willing to make it happen as soon as we're given direction to do so, keeping in mind that that portion of Fort Valley Road is also an ADOT route. And
Yeah,
so
I realize that. And that's what's
that
made
would
it a little
delay
complicated.
the timing.
All right, good. I'll check with Mr. Clifton. Thank you so much, Brett.
You bet. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Odegaard?
Thank you, Mr. Peterson, for the presentation. I did really enjoy it and really looking forward to the future projects that are happening for our community. So thank you.
Yes, sir. You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, any more comments on this? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Peterson.
Thank you.
We're going to move down to item number H and then go back up to the agenda. Right now, we're down to the financial management policies, a grant pursuit. This is pages 30 through 34 of your packet. Mr. Milebach is recommending that the board consider a grant pursuit policy to provide clear direction to staff and member agencies about how MetroPlan will pursue funding. Mr. Milebach?
Thank you, Mayor and members of the board. I have a PowerPoint up on your screen that I'm hopeful you can see. And the point of this is to figure out how we can increase our speed regionally and have more clarity and more success with grant funding. And I'm going through this PowerPoint because this is something that I've shared with the technical advisory committee and the management committee based on what we've learned over the past several months of pursuing grants. And the key part of it here I want to just get clear on is increasing our alignment and our capacity to accept and implement transportation grants. And then really to address some challenges that we've experienced recently. So when we look at MetroPlan's role, our vision is to create the finest transportation system in the country. And obviously, achieving that vision and getting closer to it requires resources. And we have a mission, which is really, I think, much easier to kind of get our hands around, leveraging cooperation to maximize financial and political resources to actually build that system. And when we get into our guiding principles, it talks about, we're going to leverage champions for projects and we're going to write and secure competitive grants. So really all this pursuit of federal funding is really baked in to our organization. And we even adopted a very measurable objective to secure a couple $2 million over the next 5 years. Really, we want to secure $750,000 by the end of this fiscal year. So in our pursuit of funds, we've learned some things and just some reminders. A build grant has been pursued the past 5 years by the city of Flagstaff. Dave Wessel has put a tremendous amount of time into this grant over the past 5 years, probably 100+ hours each iteration. And again, this year, we unfortunately did not receive it. And the project is basically going to be done by the time the next grant cycle for build comes through. So we have to reconsider how to pursue the funding. Section 5339 is the next comma. That is transit funding. And some of you will recall that we really scrambled, and thanks to a great partnership with the city and Mountain Line and their openness, a grant was submitted for $19 million actually to try to leverage some of the funding for projects that Brett Peterson was just speaking about. And also we've been pursuing advanced technology, signal synchronization and so forth. So over the past 6 months in terms of, or year, and what we've learned, the board has been clear in setting priorities for us. So the board has said, look, get bike and pedestrian funding, get Lone Tree TI funding. The Lone Tree TI is not new. We've been talking about that since before I started this position. And then also pursue this advanced technology funding. And going through it, we've learned that member agencies need some stuff. Really, they need some more advance notice, and they need to be able to budget federal match earlier. They need to understand impacts on staff, and they need to know what their approval process is. So can Brett Peterson just sign a grant and send it off, or does it have to come from Dan Folk or City Council or Manager Clifton? I put some things up here, and I almost want to apologize if this seems too pedantic. I've really boiled it down to be very simple because, I just didn't want to assume this whole really idea that doing more local work at less local cost is good, because sometimes it seemed like it's been harder to pursue grants than I would have anticipated. And so the graph here just illustrates $1 million local leveraged against a federal grant that's 80%, that's $4 million federal. We can do $5 million worth of work with $1 million local money. That's a really big deal. And even with the signal technology grant, that's a 50% leverage. So 3 million local would equal 6 million for a total project. And then the reality is federal funds often require increased costs. So for example, the Lone Tree Railroad overpass, we looked very carefully at a low interest federal loan and determined because of the additional costs of environmental requirements and wages and overhead, it just wasn't worth it. The margins were too thin. And then when we looked at the signal technology grant, recognized, there's going to be additional staff required and there's going to be ongoing management. So if we, and I say the collectively we, are going to commit to this, we need to know where those costs, how they're going to be paid. So another key thing is local match being documented. Now I put an example here, cash flow, and just to say, look, 30 million for bike and ped over 20 years. I, with MetroPlan, cannot just assume that that means 1.5 million each year. It might be less. Well, as we know from Brett's presentation, it's actually more than that. It's 2 million each year for the first few years. But that money has to be budgeted for us to successfully pursue a grant and be able to receive it. And then I want to point out, interagency coordination, frankly, it's harder. I mean, let's go back to a couple of the items I started this board meeting with. We need to adopt a local budget. We need to adopt the ADOT's UPWP. We need to do it in a way that blends with what what Mountain Line needs. And it's hard even, and I think if you look at your own organizations, you got 800, 1,000, 3,000 employees. Communication is a challenge, keeping even one organization in alignment. And the reality of MetroPlan is we are trying to stay in alignment with 3 or 4 or 5 different organizations at the same time. And that just really takes diligence and clarity and communication about what it is we are trying to accomplish. So the point here is to make sure that when we, MetroPlan, our region, pursues grants, that we're ready at the policy level with the board, at the management level, city county manager, at the financial level. So all your financial folks who want to say, yeah, we really do have that money, or no, I really don't think we do. And then the technical folks who are ready to actually implement projects. And then as we go through the process, really understanding the impacts on partner agencies, so they're communicated and understood. So a question will come up, you want our support, right? Maybe ADOT will say, you want our support. Well, what does that mean? Do you want us to lead or do you want us to support? What exactly? And if you need match, is that cash that needs to be in our budget? Am I assigning a staff person to a project so you can leverage it? You know, all those things have to be clear. So our challenge comes to gain commitments from MetroPlan partner agencies at all levels so we can pursue grants with confidence. And the approach is, and this is not rocket science, this is basic. I mean, I've tried to take this kind of universe of all these things bouncing around and bring them into focus in a way that's just simple for everybody to work together. Just a policy and a practice for annually approving grants that we're going to pursue. And also to be clear on flexibility. And I want to put an example out here, and Manager Clifton, said it really well a couple of months ago. The transit grant for $19 million that can be used for bicycle and pedestrian projects, we became aware of that money because something shifted and suddenly there it was on Tuesday, and the grant was due Friday of that week. And, clearly we could have said, oh, 3 days, there's not enough time, no way. But we didn't. We said, sometimes it happens this way, we have got to jump on this opportunity. So we want to certainly maintain that flexibility. I think the key point is that's our fallback. That's not where we start, right? We want to start with a lot of structure and methodology and forethought, but know that if we have to jump, we can. So addressing some of the concerns, if pursuing a grant or receiving a grant increase staffing costs, or it increased maintenance costs, or it requires more facilities, the question becomes, can the grant pay for that? Because if it can't, we might not be able to actually afford the grant. So what we've done here is put together this approval worksheet and checklist, and probably board, I want to say you're probably not going to see this very often except as an attachment, but I put it up here on screen now and I hope you all can see it because it just works through a process for each grant that we, MetroPlan, would go through with each member agency. So, the details of each grant and what are the impacts on staff and facility and operations, and then just get really clear what we're pursuing. Are we ready to do it? And then get approvals from the people we need to. And maybe in some cases it's city council or the board of supervisors. Maybe it's the city or county manager. Just depends on what the grant is. And I'm going to jump away from the spreadsheet and actually try to take you over to your board packet. And I hope this is up on the screen now. And I'm going to scroll down a little bit. And I'm hoping you can see on the screen where it's page 31 of your packet, it says a grant pursuit policy draft. So we have financial management policies that Rosie brought forward just last month that the board adopted. And based on everything we've learned over the past few months, I'm suggesting some draft language here for a grant pursuit policy. And Mayor, let me confirm, can you see that up on the screen?
Yes.
Great. Okay, really basic, that MetroPlan will complete grant pursuit worksheets for grants it intends to pursue, that sheet that you just saw. And we're going to share these worksheets with appropriate parties, including members of the management committee and the technical advisory committee. And we're going to get signatures on these things so we know we've got support and commitment on what we are pursuing. And then I put this last bullet of still nothing in this policy will prohibit MetroPlan from pursuing grants when it feels it's in the best interest of MetroPlan or MetroPlan's member agencies. And here's the thing. I am really committed, and I believe that as an organization, MetroPlan has to be committed to working incredibly closely with our member agencies to give them what they need. It's the nature of our structure that we have a lot of people to work with to coordinate and get on the same page. And it's time consuming, but it's what we need to do. At the same time, I would be remiss as your executive director if I didn't point out, I think we still need to maintain our autonomy. So if, for example, there's a tremendous grant opportunity and we just can't get everybody together from the different agencies to pursue it, it still might be in our best interest to go for it sometimes. So I'm retaining, that right or privilege within this policy so that it's clear. And I want to open this up for discussion, Mayor. I know I'm sharing a lot of information here. I guess I would just like to end, though, that I shared this PowerPoint presentation with the Technical Advisory Committee and the Management Committee. They were very supportive and I think appreciative of the effort. I have not yet, however, shared this grant pursuit policy, these 4 bullets up on screen. And before asking the board to adopt this policy, I'd really like to bring it back to the Technical Advisory Committee and the Management Committee and let them get their tracks on it. And then ask you all to consider it again next month. I just think that's the kind of best way to honor the processes that we've established with these various committees for MetroPlan. And Mayor, that concludes my report.
Okay. Mr. Peru?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Jeff, a question regarding your words about seeking grant opportunities when they may arise and we may not have the opportunity to loop everyone in on proceeding with a grant opportunity. I certainly understand that, but I would also want, and I know you would want to do the same thing and probably already have it in your process, that you would loop back to agencies after the fact to letting them know that MetroPlan has pursued a particular grant, just so that everyone is in the loop regarding opportunities that may come our way. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor, and Mr. Prue, if I can respond to that. Thank you. I can see adding an additional bullet here that makes clear that we will commit to doing that.
Okay, anybody else? So Mr. Mileback, do you need approval from us at this time, or are you going to bring this back for that?
Mayor, I don't need approval at this time. I mean, you certainly can take action if you want to. It's agendized for that. I would really like to run it through our committees again and get their feedback and bring it back and ask for approval at our next meeting.
Okay, so we'll see that in December, I believe, right?
Correct.
Okay. So we're going to go ahead and go back up the agenda to E. And this has to do with our strategic advanced planning. These are pages 23 to 25 of our board packet. Mr. Mileback.
Thank you, Mayor. I do want to point out that there is a wandering minstrel going by with a guitar. So if you're hearing that background noise, I apologize. This item is for the strategic advance, and I think most of you, I think everybody here in the room almost will recall participating in that advance last year, and we did it in January. And the strategic advance basically helps us spell out exactly what we're going to be working on in the coming 12 to 18 month period. And the kind of system and the momentum we establish is every year I come back and I say, here's what you asked us to do. Here's what we did. Here's where we didn't quite make it and why. Now, what do you want us to do next? And we have an engaged discussion that's very strategic in nature with the management committee and the board and staff. And what I'm suggesting this year is that we wait until February to hold this advance. And if you scroll down, I've put up on the screen page 25 of your packet. It just spells out how we will approach this, or I'm suggesting we approach it. I'm suggesting February 3rd because we have at least 2 new members on the board, because we have 2 elected officials on the board who are moving on, Mayor Evans and Supervisor Babbitt. And if we wait until February 3rd, we'll give people a chance to kind of get their feet wet after the first of the year before throwing them into a strategic advance. I'm also suggesting that we just do this as a 2-hour Zoom event. And in years past, we've done 4+ hours. And I think it might be a challenge to do in 2 hours, and it might be a challenge to do as a Zoom event. But I'm suggesting we do it to save everybody time, and because we just don't know what the status of COVID is going to be at that time. And then I will, a month or so later, bring back the work plan so you all can get your tracks on it, and then adopt specifically, the work you want us to accomplish. I'm suggesting that again this year we save the money and I just facilitate the advance. The feedback I had on that last year was that it went fine and we don't need the expense of an outside facilitator. Of course, if the board sees it differently, that's why I'm bringing this item forward today. So we can make whatever adjustments you think we need to. And then I spell out a basic agenda here that you can see up on the screen. And that really concludes my report for it. I'd like to hear, if I could, any feedback you have on our approach to the strategic advance this year. Mayor Evans.
Mr. McCarthy.
I thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Jeff. I believe that the city will be having a 2-day budget retreat on February 1st and 2nd. So I'm not sure it's good to have your meeting like on the 3rd, and I don't remember what day of the week that is. But maybe it would make sense to move that out. Even 1 day might make a difference. Maybe coordinate with the city manager about that. As far as it being on Zoom, probably should have planned it for Zoom. On the other hand, if we all get a vaccine and everything's completely safe again, obviously a face-to-face meeting would be preferred, but there's no way to predict that one way or the other yet. Those are my comments, but I do think it makes sense to wait until after the new council and the new Board of Supervisors appointees have had a chance to kind of, get their feet wet, so to speak. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments on this? I don't see any, Mr. Malbec, so I'm going to take the assumption that a February timeframe would be fine.
Thank you.
Now, is Mr. Wessel available today?
No, Madam Chair, members of the board, Mr. Wessel is on a well-deserved vacation, and I can give you a brief update on this in his absence.
Okay, so we will go ahead and take item number F, is our regional transportation plan update.
Okay, as you may recall, last month, Dave Wessel presented a very full and complete presentation on the regional transportation plan. And just want to let you know that over the past month, we have worked more with Mountain Line on joint procurement, and we've talked to the city about how we could coordinate with their regional plan effort. And ultimately, over the past month, we've come clear on a few things. One, we're going to get in and do the regional transportation plan first and try to provide some data that the city and Mountain Line can use for their respective planning processes. So in other words, if we get in and we get some data that they find useful, they do not have to each go out and get their own data. on some key areas. So we're going to try to find those kinds of synergies. And we are going to go it alone on procurement. It doesn't really work for Mountain Lion to do the procurement for us. Just an administrative thing to let you know. Our goal, as it says in the work plan we adopted, was to have the team, have the request for proposals out and have the team who's going to do the regional plan contracted by the end of this calendar year. And we are still on track to do that. And that concludes my report, Mayor.
Okay. Any questions, comments? Okay, we'll go ahead and move down to the item number G. This is the Transportation Improvement Plan Amendment, pages 28 and 29 of your agenda. Staff's recommended action is the board approve a TIP amendment moving $17,012 in HSIP funds to the City of Flagstaff's share of the Schweitzer Canyon Roundabout project, and 2 minor amendments addressing carry forward funds in the amount of $10,000 in the STBG funds. Mr. Malbach?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And this item might seem a little redundant, and we're talking about small dollar figures here. I just want to remind the board that we brought the TIP amendment back to you just last month, and we became aware of $17,000 that was available for a project. And what we heard requested from the Technical Advisory Committee and also requested from a couple of Metropolitan Board members was to really find a way to move this $17,000 towards the city's share of cost overruns on the Schweitzer Canyon Roundabout project. So over the past month, we were able to do that. And what I'm asking the board to do is just memorialize that decision here by adopting this amendment, and then the funds will be available directly to the City of Flagstaff.
So board, are there any questions or a motion?
Madam Chair, this is Steve Pearl. I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
This is Charlie, and I second that. Thank you.
Okay, there's been a motion made by Mr. Peru and a second by Mr. Odegaard to approve these, the TIP amendment, moving the $17,012 in HSIP funds to the City of Flagstaff's share of the Schweitzer Canyon Roundabout project, and then 2 minor amendments addressing carry forward funds in the amount of $10,000 in STBG funds. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. Now down to item number I, letter I, regional plan model. This is pages 35 and 37 of our agenda pack. There's no recommended action for this. This is just going to be an overview. I'm going to go back to Mr. Malbach.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. This is one I have to say, Dave Wessel is the savant when it comes to modeling and data management. The report that I would give you is, this is something that we committed to doing by December 31st, 2020, having the modeling updated with the data points that are needed so we can do appropriate transportation planning projections. And as Dave has documented in this report that he wrote, essentially the calibrations all seem to be tying out well, and that the project really is on schedule to be completed as we had hoped. Dave can certainly come back and go into more detail on this if you like. My sense, and please correct me if I'm wrong, was that this is kind of an item that we spend more time on the Technical Advisory Committee with because of the way it impacts the models and what the various agencies are doing with projects, and less time with the policy board, and go as deep as you like. And that concludes my report.
Board, are there any questions? Not hearing any. We're going to go ahead and go to J. These are items from the executive director. We have a federal funding update, and then our next executive board meeting, which is December 2nd. Before we start with Mr. Mileback, and I do believe, I just want to mention to the board that at the December 2nd meeting, we are going to look at who the next board chair will be for Metro Plan. So I just want to make sure that we put that out there. Mr. Mileback?
Thank you, Mayor. And yes, we will need a new board chair, and December 2nd will be after the November elections. So we will be looking for someone to step into this position because the mayor is moving on to, his current chair is moving on to a state position. So with that, I want to just let you know that with the federal funding update and some of these things I had already covered in the grants that we have been pursuing, we've been keeping an eye on what's happening with possible stimulus funding and an infrastructure bill. And I'm sure, as you all know, really nothing has broken loose yet in terms of very clear federal funding that we can pursue. We remain hopeful that it will happen. Of course, I don't think anyone's anticipating it will until after the election. We're operating on a continuing resolution right now at set or established funding sources. And I always put this on the agenda because I wanted to, you never know when things might break. But really that concludes my report on the federal funding update. I would point out, Mayor, that Kevin Adam is here with the Rural Transportation Advocacy Council. So if there are questions of Kevin, I'm sure he would be willing to answer them.
Okay. Board, any thoughts, comments?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Peru?
Thank you so much. A question to Jeff regarding, legislative activities or legislative topics that may have been derailed from last session because of the session ending due to COVID and whatnot. Do you foresee, and maybe to Kevin as well, some unfinished business as it relates to the state ADOT legislative agenda as it relates to local? So I know a lot of it is captured in the 20-year plan, 5-year plan, all that, but I'm just curious in terms of kind of forecasting ahead to the next legislative session, what do you see with regard to local transportation issues that the legislature may be discussing? Thanks.
Madam Chair, if I could, in response to Mr. Peru, and then turn it over to Kevin, just specifically from a Metro Plan regional perspective, we were pursuing a special budget appropriation to do Lone Tree TI planning. And that really just stalled out and went silent in March. And certainly that's something we want to pick up again when we can. We also had been working with the idea of indexing the transit tax, and that item, which was very important to the members of this board. I know Councilmember Odegaard and also Supervisor Ryan are both on the RTAC board, have been clear that we really want to see this thing indexed. That's been important to this region. And I think that's probably a good segue, those 2 points, then moving over to Kevin, because he has a view on what's happening statewide. So if it's okay with you, Mayor, can I turn it over to Kevin?
You can.
Thank you, Jeff, Mayor, and everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. And I'd have to say that this is the most volatile, unpredictable time that I've ever experienced dealing with the state capitol, which has been about 30 years now. When the pandemic started, the legislature quickly passed through a budget, and all indications were that as soon as was safe, they were going to come back and conclude their work for the year. And over the months, the disarray that ensued continues to this day. There were efforts to bring the legislature back, but there was not an agreement on what that agenda would be if they were to come back. Now there are serious differences between the governor and legislative leadership as far as his use of executive authority during the pandemic, which has created a tremendous amount of friction and has also placed the governor in a position to where he has sort of been disincentivized to bring the legislature back when one of their sort of main agenda items is to rein in his executive authority. But even amongst the caucuses in the House and Senate, there's a tremendous amount of disagreement as far as what are the priorities. There does appear to be a majority of legislators that want to come back and finish the session, but that would require both Republicans and Democrats. And if they were to do that, they can't agree to an agenda. So at this point, and then there's trade-offs to what I'm about to say. The revenue losses have not been nearly as bad as what was anticipated. You know, when they came out with their first estimates in April, they were expecting a $1.1 billion loss spread out over several years. Within 4 months, that 1.1 billion loss with a B shifted down to 63 million with an M. It essentially evaporated. And now the first 2 months of the new fiscal year, we're already about 285 million above what was forecasted. So I haven't seen anybody formally update the state forecast, but I think we're already operating in the black. They have a committee that meets tomorrow that I think will come out with a new state forecast. But that new revenue situation, it's good in the sense that we don't have to go back and address a tremendous shortfall budget, structural deficit. But at the same time, it also is less momentum or a need for the legislature to come back in this session. So my guess is that they're just going to ride this thing out. We'll get through November 3rd and come back in January. And of course, we don't know what to anticipate in January. There is a very strong possibility, particularly in the House, that you could see a change in partisan control, and that will have a tremendous impact on next year's agenda. But I'll also say, and this again, going back to how chaotic things are, if the Republicans retain control, I think there's still going to be a power struggle. I think there's, in all likelihood, you're going to see Speaker Bowers and President Fan both face challenges for the speakership and the presidency if the Republicans regain control. So there's a tremendous amount of unknowns as far as what the agenda is going to be next year and sort of what's politically viable. So hopefully much of that will be cleared up the week after November 3rd. But for now, I think it's very difficult to sort of predict what's possible for next year.
Thank you.
Wow. Anything else? Okay, I don't see anything else from the board. Mr. Mailbat?
No, I want to thank you all for being here today and just report in summary, things are moving along well with the projects that we have. I wish you all well in your respective endeavors over the next month and look forward to seeing you back here December 2nd as a full group and talking to you one-on-one individually as needed over the next few weeks.
Well, we do appreciate your leadership and thank you all for your attendance today.
you.
Mr. Peru, do you have a comment?
Nope, just wanted to say thanks so much. It was a good meeting.
Okay. See you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody. Thank you. Thank you.